actually, you know, in many ways, plastic's an amazing material. It started to be used in earnest in the 1950s. It's cheap, it's endlessly adaptable, and you know, initially it seemed like a bit of a wonder material. But since then, we've produced about 8 billion tons of the stuff, and the vast majority of that is around 9% has been recycled, but pretty much all of the rest is either in landfill or has been incinerated. And we continue to generate vast amounts of plastic, which has enormous carbon emission consequences. There are carbon emissions throughout the plastic cycle. So in terms of the extraction of the oil in the first place, because obviously it's produced from oil, converting the oil into what are called nurdles, which are those little sort of pellets that you might have seen on beaches when they've been released into the environment. And then there's another bunch of carbon emissions that happen when the nurdles are turned into the plastic product, and then that product, when it reaches the end of its useful life, it's either incinerated, generating another bunch of emissions, or it goes into landfill and breaks that down over time, or best case, it's recycled. But recycling has its own, unfortunately, environmental footprint. It's, you know, it's a lot better clearly than just throwing plastic away. But unfortunately, there's another process of turning the plastic back into nurdles and then into the new product. And each step along the way has a carbon emission consequence. And there's an amazing film that came out earlier this year called The Story of Plastic, which I really recommend, which talks a lot about that carbon cycle and also some of the social consequences of the plastic cycle, because the communities that use all these amazing plastic products are very often a long way away from the consequences of the production and incineration. So that's one side of things, the carbon emissions, and you know, that for me is the real primary driver. But there's also, of course, a very well publicised marine and to a lesser extent land pollution aspect. From the marine point of view, for example, around 8 million items of plastic enter the sea every single day. And in the UK alone, on any British beach, around 5,000 items of plastic will be littered on each mile. So it's astonishing numbers. And it goes everywhere through the food chain. Around 1 million seabirds every year die from ingesting plastic. And it enters as microplastics. As the plastics break down, they enter the very lowest level, the single cell organisms, and then from there right the way up to the fish that we consume. And of course that too has consequences, and that piece, you know, the consequence of us ingesting plastic is only really now being begun to be understood. The health implications of that, you know, the chemicals in plastics and their impact on our hormones and that sort of thing. And there are studies beginning to build up with some quite scary statistics around that. Finally, there's something around the throwaway culture, and this comes back to the fact that, you know, plastic, it is so cheap, but it's so disposable, and there's a tendency to, you know, choose the cheap plastic version in the first place because it's cheaper and more accessible, but then it breaks more quickly, and then rather than attempt to mend it, it's cheaper to buy another one. And that feeds into a sort of culture of consumption and a sort of throwaway mentality, which is very unhelpful in terms of our overall strategy of, you know, addressing the climate emergency. So lots of things to think about. And in terms of why now, I think over the past 10 years, there's been more and more coverage of some of these issues. The Blue Planet series really, you know, brought the marine side into sharp relief. Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall's War on Plastic series did a fantastic job of making people really see the disposable plastic in their own homes and how they might start doing something about it. We've also seen a lot of scary stories about microplastics being absorbed into our bodies from tap water. There was something the other day about babies drinking from bottles and how many millions of microparticles of plastic they're consuming. They found microparticles in snow in the Arctic, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. You know, it's prevalent everywhere now. And of course, COVID and the pandemic and the very necessary PPE to deal with that has only worsened the issue. So who are we? We are a voluntary group. Aside from me, I'm the paid project coordinator, but everybody else who's involved is a volunteer. We were set up by Cloudy Williams, who you can see there in the picture to my left. Cloudy and her family were inspired to do something about plastic when they were on holiday in the Med a few years ago, and just found themselves swimming in a sea of plastic waste. So when they got home, they decided to try for a year to avoid all disposable plastic. And to a great extent, they actually achieved that, and they continue to live in that way. And Cloudy has this amazing blog called The Joy of Living Without Plastic, which I really recommend, just talking about some of the practical challenges around removing single-use plastic from your life, but also some of the joys and some of the unexpected benefits that come from a more mindful way of life, focusing more on local produce, local economy, local community, and that sort of thing. And the same sort of themes that often resonate when we talk about climate stuff. It comes down to resilient local communities and that being the way ahead. So in terms of us as an organisation, we are an affiliate of Transition Stroud. We're supported by both the district and the town council in what we do. And we also run Refill, Stroud Refill, which if you haven't come across Refill, it's an app for your phone where you can look up, it's a mapping app essentially, where you can look up the nearest place to refill. Originally it was just a water bottle, but more recently they have cafes and restaurants and markets and shops sign up for places where you can buy loose food. What's next? So this is us. We, as Jennifer said, we recently were accredited under the Surfers Against Sewage plastic-free community programme for the Stroud District. And that programme has really shaped our work to date. It has 5 arms. You have to get your local council on board, which for us was our district council passing a motion on taking on a challenge with regard to single-use plastic, although actually the county council has also passed that motion now. There's a piece around local companies. So in our case, we had to recruit 34 plastic-free champions. And that's basically as a small or medium-sized business within our area that commits to remove at least 3 instances of single-use plastic. And that can either be from their workplace or their wider operations or their supply chain. But what we quite often find, in fact, most of the time we find, is that once people start delving into this stuff, they, it's very encouraging. They don't stop. They do their 3 that they have to do to get the award, but more often than not, they find many more than that. And then in some cases, they really take it on board and run with it and become, fantastic case studies that we can take out to other similar organisations and show them just what can be done.
And it's amazing that you've managed to work with 2 of the really big local businesses. Can you tell us a bit about how those relationships came about?
Yes, absolutely. So Cloudy, I'm not sure how she first got in touch with Renishaw because it was before I became involved, but they they have a fantastic sustainability team that we started working with quite early on. They were doing a lot of work themselves in their own operations on reducing single-use plastic, but they also offered to support us as our sort of flagship business. And they've done quite a few things for us. They allowed me to host at their offices a large business workshop where we sort of pulled together some of the larger employers from the area and just basically sat them down around the table for the afternoon and traded stories and challenges and solutions for single-use plastic. So Ecotricity came along, and Stroud College, and In Vivo from a smaller pharmaceutical company from Stroud, and a large environmental consultancy, and a couple of others. And it was really interesting because, for instance, Ecotricity do some very inventive thing. So all of their cleaning, their office cleaning, is done with ozonated water. So they have a machine on the wall in each of their premises that just takes tap water, puts some ozone through it, and then for 24 hours, that water is antibacterial. And so they don't use cleaning products. They just use this ozonated water to clean with. And then at the end of 24 hours, the water's just thrown down the sink. It's completely harmless. And then the cleaners refill the next day. And, you know, so it was fantastic for Renishaw to hear that and be able to consider doing that in their premises and things like that. There were lots of examples. And so, yeah, Renishaw have been great. They were also going to host for us a big screening of the film I mentioned, Story Plastic, but unfortunately COVID got in the way. But they've been incredibly supportive and yes, a great help to us with the Surfers Against Sewage.
And did you find that the challenges were quite kind of sector specific, or were there really common themes that came across the different businesses?
There are some that are sector specific. So clearly, if Renishaw is sending out a highly technical measuring instrument, it needs a certain sort of packaging. But even that kind of thing, they were looking at mushroom-based packaging. So a sort of alternative to plastic that's made of mushroom material. But that same packaging, they ended up recommending to Train Spotting, who are a sort of vintage style lighting company in Stroud. So there was still commonality, and at the end of the day, all of the big businesses have staff, they have catering, they have cleaning obligations, and so there was a great deal of basic commonality around the main plastic challenges. So that was great. So there were lots of good stuff to share. Yeah. So yes, that was companies. We also had to reach out to around 30 different parts of the community, so schools, community organisations, sports teams, that sort of thing. And we had some requirements around the events that we do. So we run, under normal circumstances, we have a monthly volunteer meeting, but we also do lots of, we help out at festivals to help them be as plastic free as possible. And we've done film screenings, we've done lots of litter picks and plogging, which is that Swedish idea, where it's for more coordinated people than me, where you run and litter pick at the same time. Oh yes, all sorts of things. And then there's also a requirement about having a steering group, and ours tends to meet about twice a year to sort of determine where our work is going to go next.
So it sounds really varied and a nicely structured program.
Yeah, it's great actually, and it tests you that all of the targets are based on your population size, and because we were doing the whole of Stroud District, they were quite testing targets, because obviously people are so far away and so widespread, but it also made us really get out into the community, and that's been really helpful, and yes, things like so working with different communities. So in Wootton Under Edge, for example, we worked with the Chamber of Trade there as a way to impact as many businesses as possible, as quickly as possible. So we sort of co-produced with them a plastic pledge that all of their members signed up to, and that was a great process, and something that we'd like to do with other chambers of trade around the district. It meant that we could disseminate the information, and they could then go on and share their ideas with each other through their own meetings. So that was very positive too.
Are the challenges different for smaller businesses? Do they sometimes find that they want to replace some plastic thing, packaging, for example, but that for them as a small business, the cost is quite a barrier for them?
Yes, I think that's right. That someone like Renishaw is very spoiled. They have a dedicated sustainability team, and they also have a lot more flexibility on price. But we've not yet come across a company that we haven't been able to find solutions for. So even if their primary product plastic challenges are too difficult to get around, there will be other things it might be in their workplace that all of their catering can be changed, or that they're cleaning, and the point of the Surfers Against Sewage program is really that as many businesses as possible get on board with what is hopefully quite a small obligation of changing 3 things, but that the scale of that, if it's replicated across the whole country, means that a lot of plastic is saved. So, but yes, you're right. It's definitely more challenging for the smaller and particularly the very specific businesses who have one product where they're quite wedded to the way that they do it.
And I think you sent us the list of local businesses that have worked with you. It's a really long list now. How many businesses have worked with you?
We'd worked with 34 of the small and medium ones by the time we were accredited, and a few more since, and then about sort of 6 or 7 large businesses. I think the next slide might be, next slide is just some pictures, mostly of our champions. So you can probably see some Nailsworth faces in there. We've got Coco and Shiny Goodness and Junglist Atelier, who else? Beeswax Wraps and Pulp. Yeah, so in fact we're very well represented in Nailsworth. Cake Box, they've just relocated to just outside Nailsworth, haven't they? So yes, I've spent a lot of time in Nailsworth, and obviously you're very lucky. You have a lot of very receptive, sustainable businesses anyway.
Do they tend to approach you, or do you approach them?
A bit of both, actually. Sometimes it's through talks that we've done that somebody will come up afterwards and say that they're interested, or that somebody that they know is interested. And sometimes I contact people directly, and then sometimes, like in Wootton, for example, I try and contact a whole bunch of businesses through an overarching organisation. So yeah, a bit of both.
Yeah. And can we sort of go backwards a little bit? I'm really interested to learn a bit more about your own journey. Why plastic? What led you to where you are now?
I think I was just becoming increasingly conscious of it in my own life. I think when the children were small, there's just so much plastic associated with small children, or can be, whether it's nappies or wipes or yogurt pots, and it just felt like a rising tide that I was trying to address, not always successfully. And I was just coming out of that phase when the job came up at SDAP, and which I took, and that opened my eyes to a lot more solutions, but also some very inspiring people. I mean, Claudia's extremely inspiring, and through SDAP I've met lots of other people, but it's also been great to be part of an organisation that is focused on solutions, albeit some of them are very small, and they're not going to save the world by themselves, but it's a lot easier to sleep at night, and I'm sure you feel the same being part of a CAN, if you are on the right team and the team that's trying to do something about it, within your own capabilities.
Yeah.
So yes, that was it really.
It seems to be as well, eliminating plastic from your household. It feels like there's lots of habits that we get into that if we can just think a little bit further ahead, perhaps. I'm just thinking today, I feel so ashamed. I went to Tesco because my daughter wouldn't eat the food I'd prepared, and the only thing she wanted was pasta in a plastic container. And if I'd just thought ahead a little bit more, that could have not happened.
Yeah, I think, but I think it's key to focus on the things that you can, change. Clearly, all of it. I'm not holding myself out as some sort of guru, and there will be days where everything goes wrong, particularly if you have small children. So, I think, as you say, it's about getting into good habits. It's about knowing where the solutions are, and as they turn into habits, it just becomes easier, and it's just part of what you do, that once a month you go and refill your bottles, or whatever it is that you're doing, and you find ways to make it easier for yourself as well. Because I did a talk for Hawkwood the other day, which was a very sort of practical talk, where I basically assembled most of my house around me and talked through all the different solutions, and if anyone's interested in that will still be on their Facebook page. But one of the things I was talking about was that not everything will work for you first time. So for example, I was using shampoo in plastic bottles, and I wanted to transfer to shampoo bars, and it was just a disaster for me because my shower doesn't have anywhere to put the bar, so it just turned into a sludgy mess. And I've got long hair, and the bars are quite expensive, and I was going through like not quite one a week, but it was costing a lot of money. So I just had to ditch that and then try a new solution. And for me, that was refilling the bottles. But there have been a number of things like that where, you know, the first time I've tried something, it just hasn't quite worked out because it's not the right solution for me. Or there are just days where everything just, you know, the stars are not aligned, and that's fine. And it's just about, you know, it's like being on a diet or something. The next day you just start again, and it's about, you know, over time, the huge amount of plastic that you can save, not about worrying about the bits that don't work out.
So it sounds like, yeah, there's lots of rewards associated with reducing plastic and in our homes, and because I think we often think it's going to be such a challenge and effort, but actually, what have been for you some of the unexpected positives that have come out of reducing your plastic use?
I think there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction to be had from, so I think on the next slides, not that one, yeah, I tried to sort of group some of the solutions that I think about when I'm thinking about this stuff. And if we just take one of them.
I can't see your slide at the moment. Is it still being shared, or is it just me?
It's saying it's sharing.
Can everyone else? Richard, you can see it? Okay, it must just be me. That's fine. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think so just taking the example of refill of those four, so that basically that is any solution where rather than getting a new container, plastic container each time, you refill your existing container, which may or may not be plastic. And so in that context, refilling bottles. So in my family, my children still drink a lot of cow's milk. I tried them on many plant milks. They're just not having it. So anyway, they get through a lot of milk. If we were buying plastic bottles of it, it would be at least 2 large bottles of milk a week. On top of that, all of our household fluids, so that would be hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, sort of kitchen spray, washing up liquid, occasionally I clean the floors, so floor cleaner. And so between those, there'll be around 100 bottles for milk and at least 50 bottles a year for general household liquids. So if you think of 150 plastic bottles just in a wheelbarrow or whatever, that's really quite a pile, and that's just my little household. And just, you know, if I ever feel a bit downhearted because, like you, I've had some sort of, you know, day that didn't work out and I've ended up having to buy something in pot, it's not the end of the world at all, because you are saving like great mountains of plastic, and that for me is what keeps me going if I ever have a bit of a wobble. But,
yeah.
Shall I just go through some of the other solutions?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So because when I think about it like this, I find that no matter what, you know, whether I'm thinking about gardening or the house or the office or whatever, all of these solutions just, you know, fall into one of these categories really. You'll notice I haven't got recycle there, and that's just because for me that is kind of back of the queue, because it's for whatever's left over basically that you would seek to recycle it, just because recycling just has this extra environmental footprint, so it's better than throwing away, but it's kind of, you know, last resort really. So refuse is just about using your voice really, so that, you know, if you are in a circumstance where you're offered unnecessary plastic, just saying no and explaining why. And you know, your voice is so powerful, so whether it's that you're in Tesco and you want to buy 3 tins of tuna and it's cheaper to do that with the plastic wrap versus not, because they've got some sort of multi-buy offer, it's just about going up to the counter once you pay for it, ripping off that plastic, taking it to customer services, and just nicely and politely saying, you know, I don't want this and this is why. And, you know, that might feel like quite a small action, but we're having really sweeping changes from the sweet supermarket now, and that is because they just get this constant drip feed of feedback from the general public. So the more we can do of that, the better. Similarly, if you're in your favourite restaurant or cafe or pub or whatever, and you get given, I don't know, a sachet of ketchup, I think it's 855 billion sachets are used each year worldwide. So huge amount of plastic when put together, and in most cases, certainly in this country, completely unnecessary. They could just have a bottle or decant a bottle into a little dish, or a pump, even better, so no container required. So just about sort of drip feeding that feedback and saying no. Refill I've touched on already, and we're really lucky around here. So many places we can refill. So in Nailsworth, for example, you've got Shiny Goodness, where you can do all of your household liquids. You can do milk, you can do all of your dry goods. You can also do milk at Hobbs House. You've got the farm shop up the road near the Tippets, where they do household products as well, loose veg, all of that sort of stuff. You can even refill wine bottles at Stroud Wine. So although they're too expensive for my taste in wine, but yeah, so refill is a real no-brainer and just saves huge amounts of plastic. So that is a great one to start with. Reuse is really about, rather than using a disposable version of something, using something you can use time and time again. So let's take sanitary towels, for example. A conventional box of sanitary towels has around 5 plastic bags worth of 5 carrier bags worth of plastic. But there are just so many reusable options now. You've got pads, you've got pants, you've got moon cups, and you know, every single period you are then saving another chunk of plastic. And particularly, you know, if you've got young daughters, as I have, and I think most women have around 400 periods over their lifetime. So if it is the norm at the beginning of a teenager's life that they just, you know, wear a reusable option, that over a lifetime is a great chunk of plastic to save. Similarly, other things like, what else would fall into this category? If you might use a washable cotton cloth rather than J cloth, you might use washable nappies for your baby, all sorts of things. I've got lots of lists if you ever want them of things that you could reuse rather than buy new.
These are great.
And then the last category is rethink, and that is just about all the other solutions that are just to do with doing something a bit differently. So it might be maybe beeswax wraps rather than using cling film, or things that are packaged differently, like in paper rather than plastic, or bamboo toothbrushes, or lots and lots of different solutions where, it would also include all the solutions for making your own rather than buying. So if you've got to the point where you've kind of finessed everything, as some people have, and you've got rid of the vast amount of plastic from your life, but you can't find, say, this particular cheese without plastic. So I did this recently. I can get hold of loose whole milk from Woefordane, and I wanted to try making some paneer and Indian cheese, and it turns out it's incredibly easy and delicious, and you can do it entirely plastic free. And similarly, yogurt, another thing that with small children we get through masses of in this house, and now I know how to do it myself, and it's much cheaper and easier, and well, maybe not easier, but very easy. And there are lots of fantastic resources on the internet for rethink, do-it-yourself type stuff. There's an amazing woman called the Zero Waste Chef who has recipes for pretty much everything you could possibly want. So I really recommend her. You know, making your own plant milks, making your own crackers for cheese, all sorts of things. And another one called the Spruce Eats. Between those, they will probably have a recipe for anything that you think you can't buy without plastic in the shops.
This is incredible. There's so many just surprising things. I wanted to ask you about items that contain plastic that we don't even realize. So I was looking for a pair of gloves online, and it said fleece, and I thought, fleece equals sheep, you know, and actually I looked into it a bit further, and it's plastic. I don't know where it could have been on one of your information sheets that it said it was plastic. The other thing is, there was this really impactful photograph of stretched jeans and the denim bit had decomposed, but all that was left was the elasticy bits, like a skeleton almost. And it feels like there's plastic just lurking in in things that we don't even realize.
I know, yeah. Really frustrating. Yeah, and textiles generally and sort of fast fashion is, you know, you could do a whole talk just about that. But fleece is a particularly frustrating one, because I think for a lot of people, well, you know, some people just bought fleece because they wanted fleece, but there's also a whole load of fleece-based materials that was sold to people on the basis that they were made from recycled plastics, which, you know, which is on the face of it very positive. But fleece then breaks down into microplastics, and unless you have one of the sort of guppy bags for your washing machine, which captures at least most of the plastic particles, those thin fibres of plastic then, you know, escape into the water system and slip through the filters. So yeah, but I mean, plastic-based textiles, so nylon, acrylic, polyester, all of that stuff, over time, particularly at the beginning of their youthful life, do shed plastic particles. So, you know, in an ideal world, we'd avoid them. Unfortunately, some of them, though, are the sort of technical fabrics that some people, not the likes of me, because I'm not at all sporty, but some people, you know, need them for particular activities that they do, you know, outward bound type activities. So if you fall into that category, but you want to also do the right thing, as I say, you can get these bags for the washing machine, which trap the plastic particles as they are shed, and then you just dispose of them in the bin, so at least they're not in the bin.
Know about that. That's amazing. Just to rewind a tiny bit, Alison says she didn't catch the name of the woman for the paneer and yogurt recipes. Who was that?
So her blog is called Zero Waste Chef.
Perfect, thank you. Gosh. And also the filters in the washing machine, did you say they're called guppy? Yes,
I think they yeah, I bought mine absolutely ages ago, so and I think the company has since changed its name, but I'll find that out before the end of this.
Thank you. And we've got a few questions from the NailsworthCAN steering group. So one question was, what do you think is the most impactful thing we as individuals or businesses can do to reduce plastic use? I know it's quite a big question. What would you say is the most impactful thing?
It just in terms of the numbers in your average household, I think it would probably be bottles for me, and just because it's a kind of click and you've done it basically, and that if you know, once you get into that habit of refilling your milk and or your household liquids, you just sort of do it. And there are little things you can do to make it easier. So for example, with the ones that for me run out regularly, because I don't necessarily want to drop anything on one particular day and go and refill, I just have 2 bottles on the go, so that I can just swap. Or there are really good products now called Ocean Saver, which are little soluble gels, so you could use any spray bottle, and when it finishes you just drop one of these in, fill the bottle up to the top, shake it, and they come with little stickers to say what the particular product is, and then you're good to go, so you don't even need to visit the shop, and they just come in a little cardboard box, so they're quite good as well. But yes, in terms of your home environment, I would say that would be the first port of call. Yeah. What I'd also recommend actually is, if you're right at the start of this journey, I wouldn't do anything for a couple of weeks. I just watch your bin and your recycling over a couple of weeks and just see what it is you're throwing away and what the main offenders are, because it will be a bit different for every household. And if you have got small children, or you've got older people in your family, or you've got particular medical needs, or whatever it is, it will drive a different sort of profile of plastic, so you might want to adapt what you do accordingly.
And something that I think, I don't know about everyone else, but stresses me out is when things like the cartons of, I don't know, plant-based milk that have the plastic cap, but it's basically a cardboard thing. I always wonder what's gonna end up that little bit of plastic.
Yeah, I've asked actually, because for a while I was sitting in the Stroud District offices next to the recycling team. So I've asked them these questions, and they basically when it gets to the recycling facility, which is in Gossington, sort of the A38 somewhere, they will, if necessary, they will separate the parts of that to recycle the cardboard, and the little piece of plastic realistically will probably be thrown away, but it won't contaminate the cardboard. But they don't give guidance on that, because what I would have quite liked to see is on the website, detailed nerdy plastic guidance. Yes. But they very much shy away from that, and I do understand that better now, because what they don't want to do is put off people who might have followed the top 10 simple guidelines, which deals with the vast majority of the population, just for the sake of making the likes of you and me happy about whether we should take the envelope, or plastic off the envelope, or whatever else it is.
Yeah.
So, but yes, if you have the time to rip off the piece of plastic, that makes their life a little bit easier, but it's not a big deal. The cardboard will still be recycled.
Yeah. Someone's just said, could all these amazing ideas and resources and local supplies be emailed out or put up on the NailsworthCAN website? Absolutely. I think we've got a lot of writing up to do after this talk. There's some really amazing resources. Things I didn't know about as well. It's really great. Another question, let's see, from TerraCycle. There seems to be lots of very specific ways of recycling specific things, like specific brands of cheese packets.
TerraCycle is quite a frustrating organisation. So TerraCycle is it has these specific recycling schemes, as you say. It's funded by some of the biggest brands as part of their sort of closed loop recycling efforts. And perhaps slightly cynically, I'm not sure there's not enough funding put into it, or whether they don't want it to get too big, but TerraCycle make it very difficult to find your local outlets. So in theory, they have a search box on their website where you should be able to go on and say, I'd like to recycle cheese in Nailsworth, where do I do that? It just doesn't return useful results. So it has to be slightly word of mouth. And I've been trying to gather information about the various TerraCycle pots and I'm also in the process of developing our new website, and I thought it would be a good place to sort of put all this stuff. So I don't know enough about Nailsworth yet. I know that your school at one point was collecting stuff to make a bench, and I know that the co-op in Nailsworth were collecting at least some stuff, and opticians and dentists collect their various bits and pieces related to their operations. But the bigger TerraCycle schemes are Stroud Valley's project in Stroud, which does the vast majority of things. So it does electrical items, personal items like makeup containers, razors, ink cartridges. I'm not sure whether they do cheese actually. The Bisley Green Shop group definitely do cheese and crisps and all of that sort of stuff. But and I've got I've got a sheet for both SVP and for the Green Shop of all of the TerraCycle schemes that they do. But if anyone can pass to me information about Nailsworth things, then I will add them to my ongoing database.
Yeah.
Hopefully eventually we'll all know where we can do it.
Yeah. It won't be a mystery anymore.
Yes.
That sounds good. Another question from Alison. It says, Chloe, I'm wondering if you've had any productive interactions with producers of household items or toiletries or food, the actual producers, for example, test marketers. She says, for example, as following Colgate's launch of Smile for Good with the first recyclable toothpaste tube. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Certainly not on that scale, the kind of Colgate scale. That particular launch made me quite cross, because they. So it's a great idea in theory, because most toothpaste tubes you can't recycle except through TerraCycle. And then Colgate, about a year or two ago, brought out this new tube that you can put in your recycling bin. But ever since it came out, they've been charging almost double what all the other toothpaste cost. And I appreciate they had a little bit of intellectual property involved in developing this new solution, but it was not that complicated. They just chose a different polymer. But no, the only discussions I've had have been with really quite small producers like Seal, Stroud, so local cosmetic companies, one-man bands essentially. But I'd be keen to do more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Another question. I think personally, when I see the word recyclable or recycle, anything that contains the word recycle, I think, oh, that's a good thing. But actually, I think listening to you, it's made me think a bit more about, I guess, that just because you can recycle it, that there's problems involved there. What about items that are made from, you mentioned fleece, recycled plastic?
Generally speaking, I think very positive if things are made from any recycled material. I would have your sort of greenwashing ears open, because quite often something will say, these glasses are made from ocean, recycled plastics dragged out of the ocean, and then you look carefully and you see it's actually 3% and the rest of it is virgin plastic. So it's always worth like a closer look. But no, I mean, we have like plastic coming out of our ears. If we can just use at least some of it for recycled materials, that's fantastic. And I know in quite near where I live, down in sort of Chalford, Brinscombe way, they've installed at least one bench there that's been made of recycled plastic from the TerraCycle scheme, and that's great, and that will last for hundreds of years. And because that's the problem with plastic, it lasts for hundreds of years. But whereas you might have had to go through multiple timber benches in that time, you've got a very robust solution that's made from essentially a free material and keeps it out of landfill or incineration.
Yeah. And there seems to be quite a lot of interest in the plugging concept. Matt would like to know a bit more about that. Where does the Action on Plastic group meet for your plugging activity?
It's not me. I'm not a plugger.
Okay.
That would just result in me falling flat on my face. No, the plug we did was with the Wootton trotters, I think they're called. And I also started some conversations with the Stroud athletics group, but COVID got in the way. But so we don't have a dedicated group really, and there's no mystery to it. I mean, that has a fancy Swedish name, but ultimately it's just litter picking but running. But if you ever want to do any litter picking at whatever pace suits you, the district council have all the materials that you can borrow. You just have to get in touch a little bit in advance to because you need to sign a sort of a risk form, and then you pick up the grabbers and the gloves, and they have these nice hoops now that you can use that hold the bags open for you, which makes life quite a bit easier. And then they will arrange then to come and pick up the litter and the recycling afterwards.
Are there particular areas that they want you to go plugging in, or
no? I mean, they're just grateful for anything, to be honest. But they do have some health and safety concerns, so they won't give you the authorization for doing it on a main road, and they'd like you to wear high vis if you're anywhere near a road and that sort of thing. But it's fairly standard kind of health and safety stuff.
Great. Another, I guess we've been talking a lot about what we can do as individuals, but what advice do you have for groups or individuals who want to lobby industry or government to ask them to stop feeding the production cycle? What advice would you give?
I think most of what we've done has been just joining up with quite established campaigns. So we've done quite a bit with Surfers Against Sewage, just because we were on their programme anyway. But Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace and the Marine Conservation Society are all very big in this space, as are City to Sea, who are based down in Bristol. And they regularly have specific campaigns and petitions to sign, and you could spend all day, every day, basically doing whatever one of those is doing at any one time. So Surfers Against Sewage, for example, they do brand audits, where if you do a litter pick, you afterwards count up the number of records of each brand that comes up, and that feeds into their massive database. And from that, they can see once a year who the biggest litterers are, and it tends to be Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Unilever. Yeah, so I'd recommend jumping on those bandwagons, really, or setting up your own petitions. But there's so much going on already, you know, it's a bit of a shame to reinvent the wheel. I particularly like City to Sea, partly because they're relatively local, but some of their projects are particularly innovative. So they do a lot around period plastics, for example. They go into schools and talk to young people, boys and girls. They have a big focus on speaking to both sexes about it, on some, not just the plastic stuff, but also the social issues around periods. And when they are talking about the plastics, they're also talking about the social issues around plastics. So, you know, the life cycle of plastics and what communities are affected by it as it passes through those various stages. Yeah, they do some really good stuff.
Gosh, it's really, really multifaceted, isn't it? There's
yeah.
so many aspects to it. Marilyn says Horsley Community Shop has a box for crisp packets.
Oh, great. That's a good one. I'll add that to my list.
If there's any other questions from people listening, now's a good time to post them. I'll just wait a few moments, and I'm going to scan through some other questions that we've also got as well. Are you looking for new businesses to work with? Do you have capacity for?
Always keen. Yes, I'm just talking to a new little batch at the moment, some of whom are now in a position to submit their application. When they become a champion, they get a little sort of certificate and plaque and things. But I definitely have capacity to talk to more, and I'd be excited to do so. So yeah, do send them my way.
Excellent.
Did you want me to say anything about Christmas? Or
yes, please. Yeah. Yes.
So I'll just share my screen again.
Yeah, because that tends to be a particularly plasticky time of year, or it can be.
It does, absolutely. In fact, I had a look at some stats earlier in advance of this. 40 million rolls of sticky tape used each year, and we use enough wrap to go around the equator 9 times, and 120 tons of plastic wrap food is discarded over Christmas every year. So it really is, I mean, I'm sure we're all aware, just a time of massive excess, some of which is avoidable. So yes, these. So what I was going to do, actually, I saw on another plastic-free community site, Plastic Free Chesterfield, they had this really brilliant list of plastic-free Christmas tips. So I thought I'd just send that to you after this, if that's okay, in case you wanted to share that.
That would be brilliant.
So I won't spend too much time on this. I quite like this ethical hierarchy of gift purchasing, just focusing on, you know, memories, experiences at the top versus actual stuff. And that's particularly pertinent at the beginning of this session, before some people joined. We were just talking about an article in tonight's Guardian that says that human-made material has for the first time overtaken biomass on planet Earth. So we have made more, you know, inorganic stuff than there is living material on planet Earth at the moment, and it feels like a good Christmas maybe not to contribute to that. So things like experiences and anything likely to generate memories, giving time, sharing your skills, making your own, upcycling, secondhand, and then where you are buying gifts, trying to make them ethical, local, and that sort of thing. And then in terms of specific tips, I'd refer back to those 4 R's earlier about, you know, refuse, refill, reuse, and rethink, and just thinking about ways that you can dodge the plastic, basically. Glitter is a big offender because it's not even just a lump of plastic, it's already microplastic before it even starts, and it gets everywhere, as I'm sure you know if you spend any time around small children. And there are now sort of bio alternatives, but there was some research earlier this year that showed that actually in the natural environment they're even worse, they're more toxic. to microscopic life than actual plastic glitter. And that's quite a common theme, that often when we try and put in place just a direct swap of something that is biodegradable or compostable, or that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a neat, easy, non-toxic swap. They often have unintended consequences, and so something to look out for. But yes, if you can avoid glitter, there are loads of fantastic paper tapes and paper wrappings now. Shiny wrapping can't be recycled, but anything that looks like this with sort of brown paper or non-shiny, non-crinkly, scrunchy stuff can be recycled just along with everything else, so it's recommended. Pulp in Nailsworth sells both non-plastic tape and lots of lovely wrapping solutions. And don't feel you need to wrap in paper. Lots of people these days do all sorts of things, like recycled newspaper, but also old saris, or go to a charity shop and buy some old scarves, or make yourself some nice fabric bags that you can use year on year. It has the advantage of being very quick and easy if you're quite lazy like me. All sorts of things. Just get inventive, and it doesn't have to be miserable being plastic free. Same for decorations. There's just the most amazing amount of inspiration out there on the internet for plastic free decorations with dried orange peel and fir cones and salt dough stars, all sorts. And similarly, crackers, even the big supermarkets now are at least selling crackers without plastic sort of coating the front of the box. But lots of nice places to buy your own as well. Try and buy your fruit and veg loose over Christmas, and if you are at the butcher buying bits and bobs, or fishmonger or wherever else, if you can take a container along and avoid packaging, brilliant. Make your own of anything you can. Loads of fantastic pre-loved second-hand things. So this week I made my first purchase from Green Hanger Pre-Loved, who are a lovely, very small second-hand clothing business based in Minchinhampton, who I very much recommend. So I bought my Christmas Day dress from her. But charity shops or vintage shops or wherever, and experiences rather than stuff. But that is just a tiny little glimpse, because there's obviously many more things we can talk about with regard to Christmas. But if I send you through this long list, and
that's great.
You can have a look.
It feels very much, looking at all your suggestions, that these are things that require just a bit more thought, and therefore they're much nicer to receive as well. You haven't just...
I very much agree with that. Yes. They do, some of them require a bit more thought, and for that reason, maybe don't attempt all of them all at once. Certainly, not maybe you could be okay with Christmas, but if you are planning to go sort of plastic free in your home, I would not recommend trying to, because I sort of did try to tackle it all at once, and it's a bit overwhelming. But it's better to just wait, and as things run out, replace them or find a new way of doing things over time. But certainly, yes, anything that's homemade or has had that little bit of extra thought is lovely to receive, isn't it?
And that feels like a really, really lovely message to take away from your talk, that, not to pressurize yourself so much to the point where you feel you can't do it. Start with what you can do and build up.
Yes. And celebrate what you've achieved. It's very quickly, even if you do the basics, you will see your bin and your recycling bin just drop, and that's really satisfying to see.
Chloe, thank you so much. We've got so much information, and you're so full of so much knowledge and passion, and it's just been so incredible to hear all your work and all the ideas. So thank you so much. I'm going to see if I can unmute everyone so that everyone can thank you. But it might take a few more steps. Unmute. Feel bad that everyone's been silenced for this whole talk.
I feel bad for talking so much. Probably more than I've talked in the last few weeks.
But yeah, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I think some new connections are going to come out from this talk. Already there's lots of people typing messages. Let's see, Alison says, thanks for a really inspiring talk from darkest Hampshire. And yeah, lots of thank yous.
Well, thank you very much. I'll be sure to share some of those links for you.
Brilliant.
And you can circulate.
Great.